Several years ago, I developed this passion to find out more about the Bible by going to the places where the Bible was written, going to the places where the things happened. And I remember the first time I did it when I went to Israel and I walked in the footsteps of Jesus. It was a game changer for me because I could understand it in a completely different way, ways that I never understood before. After 4 years of Bible college, I didn't even grasp what I grasped in a week by walking in the footsteps of Jesus in Israel. And since that time, I followed in the footsteps of Jesus, the disciples, and more recently, the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul wrote more of the New Testament than anyone else. And it was the Apostle Paul who really took the message of Jesus to the whole world. He launched it to the world and literally changed the world. More particularly, I have been interested in the book of Romans. The book of Romans was Paul's letter to the church in Rome. Paul had not yet been to Rome at the time, and he longed to be there. He so desperately wanted to go there. But he sent a letter ahead. Now it's in our New Testament as the book of Romans. And this particular book has so much to say to us today. But for us to really understand it, just like so many other things, I felt like I needed to go and walk the streets and experience the culture that Paul was writing to. The only way to do that is you have to travel. You have to go to the place and you have to travel back in time. Well, we made the journey here through planes, trains, automobiles, buses, walking, even an attempt at a scooter. But you can't go back in time. But what you can do is you can go to the places like this that take you back in time and study. And so to begin our study in the book of Romans, we're here in Rome. And this is the Colloseum. And though the Colloseum was put up just a few years after Paul's time, it represented something of the Roman world at that time. Paul did not live here. He lived a long, long way from here. But Rome ruled the entire world. They dominated. And the Roman Empire was ruled from right here. This is the Colosseum. Right next is the Forum. This is where the Caesars and the government and everything was controlled in the Roman world. And Paul wanted to go to Rome for a lot of reasons, I think. But one of the reasons was because you've heard the saying, all roads lead to Rome. Well, not only do all roads lead to Rome, but if you think of it the other way, all roads lead out of Rome. That is, Paul believed if he got the gospel here, if he planted here, he could send the message, the good news about Jesus Christ to the whole world. Getting here was vital to Paul's mission of spreading the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. And as we mentioned before, Paul's message or his gospel was the gospel of Jesus Christ. It was as if Paul was saying, it's not the gospel of Caesar. You have to understand, when you and I think of gospel, we think of something that's religious, think of church in a modern age. But that word was used all the time in Paul's day, but it was used of Caesar, of Rome, that Caesar is going to bring peace. Caesar is going to bring good news. Caesar is going to save our world. It was as if the letter to Romans, Paul was saying, no, it's not Caesar. He was striking his name out and replacing it with Jesus, the Christ. And so we're going to study Paul's letter to the Romans. And as we study, Paul begins by talking about the problem. And we always need to start with the problem, because I think one of the reasons that Paul wrote this letter was because the world had a huge problem. And the problem in Paul's day was summarized by sin, really. You can use a bunch of other words that you would want to use, but it was selfishness. And what happens when you have sin and selfishness is you have all kinds of inhumane behavior, like stuff that happened right here at the Colloseum. Slaves were brought in. You've seen some of the movies. Perhaps you've heard some of the stories. But it was a place that one of the Caesars built just to entertain people, for political reasons, just to keep people voting his way. And he entertained them by throwing bread from above, literally rained like bread from heaven. And people went there to be fed, and they went there to be entertained. And their entertainment was cruelty. Their entertainment was inhumane behavior of animals and men slaughtering one another. And it was in this culture that Paul wrote his good news. Basically what Paul was saying is, what's happening around us, we're devouring each other with this kind of behavior. And we need a new kind of behavior. Slaves were everywhere in this culture. People were property. Human life meant almost nothing. Women didn't mean anything. And this is the kind of behavior. Slaves would have to do sexual favors for their masters, and it just went on and on and on. And out of that darkness, out of that dirt, if you will, Paul wrote a letter of hope. It was the letter to the church at Rome. It was a letter of hope and a letter of healing for a broken world.